Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are tackling a subject that is, well, it's simultaneously the most familiar thing in the world and, when you look at it biologically, one of the strangest.
It really is.
We're talking about ethanol, alcohol, the stuff in your beer, your wine, your sanitizer, and if you're a chemist, your solvent cabinet.
It's everywhere.
It's arguably the oldest recreational drug humanity knows.
Yeah.
Yet every time we open the pharmacology texts, it just feels like we're looking at an alien molecule.
It's a fascinating paradox, isn't it? It sits right at the intersection of, culture and hard chemistry.
Absolutely.
It's socially ubiquitous. It's at weddings, funerals, business deals. Yet chemically, it's a metabolic powerhouse that we often, I think, really underestimate.
That's the trap.
That is absolutely the trap because we see it everywhere. We assume it's soft. But when you strip away the branding and the glassware and you look at what ethanol actually does to a cell membrane or a neurotransmitter system, it is a sledgehammer.
That is exactly the vibe I got from reading through the source material for this dive. We're pulling heavily from two absolute Bibles of pharmacology today. Katsung and Trevor's Basic and Clinical Pharmacology, specifically the chapters on the alcohols and drugs of abuse, and of course, Goodman and Gilman's The Pharmacological Basis of Therapeutics, their chapter on ethanol.
The foundational texts.
And looking at this stack of research, it seems like the experts all agree. This isn't just a beverage. It's a drug with unfamiliar power.
That is the perfect way to frame it. And the mission for this deep dive is really to strip away the social context. We aren't here to talk about the history of brewing or the etiquette of wine tasting.
Right.
We need to look at ethanol strictly as a molecule. We need to treat it with the same pharmacological seriousness we would apply to a potent opioid like fentanyl or a complex chemotherapeutic agent.
Because when you do that, when you look at it without that social bias, you realize it's actually what pharmacologists call a dirty drug.
A dirty drug, exactly.
And that sounds so judgmental, like it needs a shower. But in pharmacology, dirty implies a lack of specificity, doesn't it?
Precisely. It's a technical term, not a moral one. A clean drug is like a laser-guided missile. It hits one specific receptor subtype with high precision, it does its job, and it leaves the rest of the body pretty much alone.
And a dirty drug.
It's a cluster bomb. It goes everywhere. It hits multiple targets. It just floods the system. And because ethanol has such low potency, you have to take a massive dose to even feel it.
Right.
That flooding is what makes the biology so messy and so fascinating.
We are absolutely going to get into the nitty-gritty of how it rewires the brain, and trust me, the way it hijacks the reward system is just terrifyingly brilliant. But let's orient everyone first. What are we actually trying to achieve here today?
We want to build a conceptual map. We're synthesizing, thousands of pages of text into a narrative to help you understand the mechanism.
The why.
The why. This prepares you for reading the chapters. It doesn't replace them. If you're a medical student or a clinician listening to this, you still need to open Katsung and look at the graphs. But we're going to give you the framework so those graphs actually make sense.
Okay, so the roadmap. What are the big pillars we need to master today?
We have four main pillars. First, the mechanism. We need to understand that ethanol is a CNS depressant that works by a process of disinhibition.
Taking the brakes off.
Taking the brakes off your behavior by messing with the brain's main gas and brake pedals, glutamate and GABA. But it's not just a sedative, it's a reward hijacker.
Okay, and the second part?
Kinetics. This is probably the most critical part for safety. Alcohol follows what we call zero-order kinetics at really any relevant dose.
Right.
This one concept explains why it is so easy to overdose or get toxic effects. It's a traffic jam in the liver that follows a different set of rules than almost any other drug you take.
We do love a good traffic analogy here. Third pillar.
Systemic impact. It's not just the liver, it's the heart, it's fetal development, the gut. Because it's such a small molecule, it respects no boundaries in the body.
It goes everywhere.
Yeah.
And finally,
adaptation, how the brain fights back. This is where we get into tolerance, dependence, and the really, really scary physiology of withdrawal. Because the brain doesn't just take this assault lying down. It changes its own architecture to survive.
Okay, let's unpack this, starting with section 1, the molecule and the problem. You mentioned earlier that ethanol is a sledgehammer and that it has low potency. That sounds contradictory. If it's a sledgehammer, shouldn't it be potent?
It's a great question, and it gets right to the heart of pharmacological definitions. Potency refers to how much of a drug you need to get an effect.
The dose.
The dose, exactly. Fentanyl is incredibly potent. You need micrograms. literal dust specks to stop breathing. Alcohol is not potent at all. To get an effect, you need grams.
Well, grams, that's a huge distinction. When I take a Tylenol, I'm taking 500 milligrams. When I take a blood pressure med, maybe 10 milligrams.
Exactly. Most drugs we deal with are measured in micrograms or milligrams. But think about alcohol. A single standard drink of beer, a glass of wine, a shot, contains about 14 grams of pure ethanol.
So we're talking orders of magnitude more substance, 1,000 times more, or even more than that.
It's a massive chemical load. If you have 3 drinks over an evening, you have just put over 40 grams of a psychoactive compound into your body.
And to put that in perspective, 40 grams of aspirin would kill you almost instantly.
It would be a catastrophic overdose. The only reason we survive drinking is that ethanol is molecule for molecule quite weak. But because we have to flood the system with such high quantities to get that buzz, we create this dirty scenario we talked about.
The cluster bomb effect.
Yes. It saturates membranes. It physically alters the fluidity of cell walls. It affects enzymes that weren't its intended target. It interacts with multiple ion channels. You're not just turning a key in a lock. You are flooding the entire engine room.
So it's not a sniper rifle picking off a specific receptor. It's more like a flood that changes the entire environment of the cell itself.
That's a great way to put it. And historically, there was this theory, the Meyer-Overton hypothesis, which basically said alcohol worked just by dissolving into the cell membrane and making it more wobbly or fluid, disrupting everything inside.
Just a general solvent effect.
It's solvent effect. Now, we know it's more specific than that. It does have specific protein targets we'll get into, but that flood concept remains valid because it's everywhere.
Let's define that flood. In the U.S., a standard drink is defined essentially by that 14-gram rule, right?
That's the standard.
So that's your 12 ounces of beer, 5 ounces of wine, or a 1.5-ounce shot of 40% spirits. And usually for a biologically average 70-kilogram person, one of those drinks gets you to a blood alcohol concentration, or BAC, about 0.03%, or 30 milligrams per deciliter.
Roughly, yes. But as we're about to see, that varies wildly based on gender, weight, and your personal metabolism. But the key takeaway here is the chemical simplicity versus the biological chaos. Ethanol is CH3CH2OH.
So simple.
It's a tiny 2-carbon chain with a hydroxyl group. It is water-soluble. It's small.
Which means it can go anywhere that water can go in the body.
Anywhere. There are these incredible biological barriers in your body designed to keep toxins out. The blood-brain barrier protects your brain. The placenta protects a fetus.
Yeah.
Ethanol walks right through them like they aren't even there. It dissolves into the water of the body and penetrates every single tissue.
And that really sets up the central tension of this whole deep dive. On one hand, you have the user experience, transient anxiety relief, a bit of euphoria, social lubrication. That's the solution alcohol seems to provide.
The perceived benefit.
But on the other hand, for the clinician, it creates this cumulative toxicity and this deep dependence precisely because it's physically everywhere in the body.
Precisely. And the first place it causes a major problem is in the processing plant. Let's talk about pharmacokinetics, or what the body does to the drug. This is where the story turns into a logistical nightmare for the liver.
The traffic jam. I want to spend some real time on this because I think the critique of how people understand drinking usually comes down to not understanding this one mechanism.
I agree. This brings us to the single most dangerous aspect of alcohol pharmacology. It's a concept called zero-order kinetics.
Which is a phrase medical students dread, but it's actually intuitive if you just look at the mechanics. Most drugs,
Right.
Let's take that ibuprofen or most antibiotics, they follow what we call first-order kinetics.
Right. And in a first-order system, the rate of elimination is proportional to the concentration.
So the more you have, the faster it goes.
Exactly. Think of it like a very efficient toll plaza where if traffic gets heavier, they just open more lanes. If you have a high concentration of the drug, the liver works faster to clear it. It clears a set percentage per hour.
So its half-life is constant.
The half-life is constant. You lose 50% of the drug every 4 hours, regardless of how much you took. It effectively scales up the workforce to meet the demand.
But alcohol breaks that system.
It shatters it because the main enzyme involved, alcohol dehydrogenase, or ADH, gets saturated at extremely low blood concentrations. We need to look at the Michaelis-Menten constant, or Karamari.
Okay, let's get technical for just a second. The K-rem represents the concentration at which the enzyme is working at half its maximum speed. A low K-rem means it gets busy fast.
Correct. For alcohol dehydrogenase, the Karamin is incredibly low, less than 10 milligdl. Remember, the legal driving limit in the US is 80 milligdl.
Wait, so at a concentration that's not even 1/8 of the legal limit, a concentration where you wouldn't even feel a buzz, the enzyme is already working at half capacity.
It's already approaching its maximum velocity, so if you drink just a few sips of a single beer, your liver's enzymes are already approaching 100% capacity. They are maxed out.
They are completely saturated.
The toll booth is full. And it doesn't matter if the line of cars, the alcohol in your blood, is 1 mile long or 20 miles long. The liver can only process a fixed amount.
And what is that amount?
About 8 to 10 grams per hour for an average adult.
Which is less than one standard drink.
It is less than one drink. So if you drink 2 drinks in 1 hour, your body processes maybe half of one. The rest just accumulates. You drink another 2, it just stacks on top linearly.
This is the traffic jam analogy.
Yeah.
But it's worse than traffic jam. The traffic jam where the cars keep piling up, but the toll booth operator refuses to work any faster.
And in fact, the operator might even be running out of tickets.
Okay, what do you mean by that?
That's the other part of the bottleneck. The tickets, in this analogy, are a cofactor called NAD plus or.
Nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide.
Yes. The enzyme ADH needs NAD plus to do its job. It takes a hydrogen from ethanol and gives it to NAD plus O, turning it into NADH. But the liver has a finite, limited supply of NAD plus syn. When you drink heavily, you deplete the NAD plus pool. The liver's entire redox state changes. It literally runs out of the fuel required to run the reaction.
So even if you somehow had more enzymes, they couldn't work because the cofactor is gone. That explains why you can't just will yourself sober or flush it out with water.
Exactly. And that pileup is why toxicity spirals so quickly. In a first-order system, the body helps you out by working faster as you get more toxic. In zero order, you are on your own. The clearance is fixed.
And that's why you can go to sleep drunk at 2 a.m. and wake up at 8 a.m. and still be legally intoxicated.
Absolutely. Your liver just couldn't chew through the backlog while you slept.
Now, the sources mention that not everyone's toll booth works the same way. Genetics play a huge role here, especially regarding the production of something called acetaldehyde.
They do. We have to look at the metabolic pathway again. Ethanol becomes acetaldehyde, which is done by ADH. Then acetaldehyde becomes acetate, which is done by another enzyme, ALDH.
And acetaldehyde is the villain here.
It is the villain. It's highly reactive. It damages proteins and DNA, and it's what makes you feel awful. It's a big contributor to the hangover.
And this leads us to the genetic polymorphisms discussed in Goodman and Gilman, specifically in East Asian populations.
Right. It's a fascinating evolutionary quirk. Many people of East Asian descent possess a genetic variant of the ADH gene that works faster than average. So they convert alcohol to toxic acetaldehyde very, very quickly.
Okay, so a faster first step. But then there's a second mutation, right?
Yes, and this is the crucial one. It's in the ALDH enzyme, the one that cleans up the mess. A significant percentage of this population has an inactive or very slow variant of ALDH2.
Oh, so they are manufacturing the toxin at high speed and clearing it at low speed.
It's the worst of both worlds. The acetaldehyde piles up almost immediately. This causes massive vasodilation, the Asian flush, along with nausea, a racing heart, and headache. It feels almost like an immediate poisoning.
Interestingly, the text refers to this as a protective genetic trait, which feels totally counterintuitive if it makes you sick.
It's protective against addiction. If drinking a beer makes you feel like you have the flu within minutes, you are very, very unlikely to develop alcohol use disorder. The data shows incredibly low rates of alcoholism in people who are homozygous for this slow ALDH gene.
But there's a big however here.
A critical however. If a person does push through that discomfort and continues to drink anyway, they have a much higher risk of esophageal and head and neck cancers.
Because acetaldehyde is a known carcinogen.
Exactly. They are bathing their throat and esophagus in high concentrations of a DNA-damaging toxin every time they drink.
Let's touch on one more kinetic trap before we move to the brain. Drug interactions. Specifically, the acetaminophen danger. We all know, or we should know, not to mix Tylenol and alcohol, but I feel like most people just think it's double stress on the liver. The mechanism is actually much more specific and dangerous, isn't it?
It is much more specific, and it involves a different enzyme system called CYP2E1.
This is part of the MEOS system, right? The microsomal ethanol oxidizing system.
Correct. Normally, ADH handles most of the alcohol, but if you are a chronic heavy drinker, the liver tries to adapt. It says, I need more help, and it induces or builds more of the CYP2E1 enzyme to help clear the alcohol backlog.
So the chronic drinker has a supercharged CYP2E1 system just sitting there.
Exactly. Now here is the trap. Acetaminophen or Tylenol is usually safe. Most of it is metabolized through a safe pathway, but a small fraction of it is always metabolized by CYP2E1 into a highly toxic metabolite called NAPQI.
And NAPQI is the liver killer.
It is the liver killer. In a normal person, you make a tiny bit of NAPQI and your body's antioxidants, like glutathione, neutralize it immediately. No problem.
But in the chronic drinker?
In a chronic drinker who has tons of this CYP2E1 enzyme lying around, a standard dose of Tylenol gets shunted down this toxic pathway in much greater amounts. They produce massive quantities of NAPQI. And to make it worse, chronic drinking also depletes your glutathione stores.
So you're making more of the toxin and you have less of the antidote to clean it up.
It's a perfect storm of hepatotoxicity. For a heavy drinker, taking 2 Tylenol for a hangover could theoretically be enough to cause acute liver failure. The therapeutic window for acetaminophen just slams shut. It is a deadly metabolic intersection.
Okay, we've thoroughly depressed the listener about their liver. Let's move upstairs. Section 3, Pharmacodynamics. How alcohol rewires the brain. This is my favorite part because it explains that central paradox of why a depressant feels like a party.
It is the classic sliding scale of intoxication. When you first start drinking at low doses, you feel stimulated. You're chatty, you're confident, you're more social.
Goodman and Gilman quotes Shakespeare here, right? Calling alcohol the gregarious porter.
That's the one. But if it's a depressant, why am I suddenly chatty? Why am I dancing on a table?
That's the question.
It's because the brain is a constant balance of excitatory and inhibitory circuits. The highly evolved parts of your brain, the prefrontal cortex, are constantly sending no signals. Don't say that, don't do that, don't take that risk. These are powerful inhibitory pathways.
Your internal editor. Superego, if you want to get Freudian about it.
Sure, that works. Ethanol depresses those inhibitory pathways first. They are more sensitive to it, so it turns off the filter.
So it's not stimulation, it's disinhibition.
Disinhibition, that's the key word. That the chatty behavior isn't because you've added an accelerant, it's because you've cut the brake lines on your social anxiety.
But as the dose increases, it starts suppressing everything else.
Right. Then it moves from the cortex down the brainstem. Motor coordination goes next, that's the cerebellum. Then speech slurs. Memory fades. Eventually, at very high doses, it suppresses the autonomic centers in the medulla that control your breathing. And that's the progression from life of the party to coma.
Let's look at the dashboard inside the neuron. What buttons is ethanol actually pressing? We said it was dirty, but Katzung and Goodman and Gilman identify very specific molecular targets.
The two big players, the real stars of the show, are GABA and glutamate.
The brake and the gas?
The brain's primary brake pedal and its primary gas pedal.
Let's start with the brakes. GABA.
Ethanol is a positive allosteric modulator of the GABA-A receptor.
Okay, that's a mouthful. Let's break that down for everyone.
The GABA-A receptor is a chloride channel. When the neurotransmitter GABA binds to it, the channel opens. Negatively charged chloride ions rush into the cell becomes hyperpolarized, and it stops firing. It's an inhibitory signal.
So it tells the neuron to shut up.
It tells the neuron to shut up. Now, positive allosteric modulator means ethanol doesn't bind where GABA binds. It binds to a different spot on that same big protein complex.
Oh, yeah.
And by binding there, it changes the shape of the receptor, making it respond more strongly to the GABA that's already there. The channel stays open longer, letting more chloride in.
So it's not pressing the brakes itself, it's making the existing brakes work too well. It's amplifying the stop signal.
Exactly. It supercharges the brain's natural inhibitory system. This is what creates the sedation, the relief of anxiety, and at high enough doses, anesthesia.
So we got GABA flooding the system, slowing things down. But Goodman and Gilman points out that this is a dual-pronged attack. It's not just enhancing the inhibition, it's actively dismantling the excitation.
This is the glutamate side of the equation, specifically the NMDA receptor.
The gas pedal.
The primary gas pedal for learning, memory, and general alertness. Normally, the neurotransmitter glutamate binds to this receptor, which opens an ion channel, calcium rushes in, and the neuron fires. It's critical for a process called long-term potentiation, which is the molecular basis of memory formation.
Which is why blocking it is so problematic for cognition.
And ethanol is a potent inhibitor of this NMDA receptor. It physically blocks the ion channel, preventing that calcium from getting in, even when glutamate is present.
So let me get this straight. You have a neuron that is being screamed at to stop firing, by the supercharged GABA system, and at the same time, it's being deafened to the fire command from the glutamate system.
You got it. It creates a profound system-wide suppression of neuronal activity. And this specific inhibition of NMDA receptors in the hippocampus is the molecular mechanism of the blackout.
Oh.
You are awake, you are walking around, you are having conversations, but the brain's tape recorder is turned off because the NMDA receptors can't initiate the memory formation process.
That explains the sedation and the memory loss perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
But we still haven't explained the addiction. If it's just a powerful sedative, why do people crave it? Why does it feel good rather than just sleepy? This has to bring us to the dopamine piece.
It does. The reward pathway. This is the engine of all addiction. We're looking at a specific circuit that runs from the ventral tegmental area, or VTA, and projects to the nucleus accumbens. This is the brain's dopamine highway.
But wait, you said alcohol is a depressant. Drugs like cocaine or amphetamine, they work by directly increasing dopamine in the synapse. How does a depressant cause a dopamine rush?
It's so clever. It's indirect. It relies on that concept we mentioned earlier, disinhibition. Kat Sung's Drugs of Abuse chapter explains this beautifully, and it's a bit of a mental puzzle to work through.
Okay, walk us through it.
Imagine the dopamine-releasing neurons in the VTA are like race cars, ready to speed off and release dopamine, but there is a parking brake pulled on them. That parking brake is a local GABA interneuron. These little GABA neurons are constantly firing, releasing GABA onto the dopamine neurons, telling them, chill out, stay quiet, don't release dopamine yet.
So the default state of the reward system is brakes on.
Correct. Now, ethanol enters the VTA. And what does ethanol do? It enhances GABA signaling. So it binds to those GABA interneurons, the brakes, and it shuts them down. It inhibits the inhibitor.
It inhibits the inhibitor, so it's a double negative. It releases the brake on the dopamine car.
Exactly. The security guards, who are the GABA interneurons, get drunk and fall asleep. Suddenly, the dopamine neurons are free. There's no inhibition on them anymore. They start firing in these rapid bursts, flooding the nucleus accumbens with a wave of dopamine.
So the security guards go on break, and the dopamine neurons throw a massive party.
Precisely. And to make it even more complex and, frankly, more insidious, ethanol also triggers the release of the brain's own endogenous opioids beta endorphins.
The body's own morphine.
Yes. These endorphins then bind to mu opioid receptors, which are also located on those same GABA interneurons, helping to shut them down even further.
So alcohol recruits the body's own opioid system to help release the dopamine. It's a two-pronged attack on the brakes.
It is. And this is why naltrexone works as a treatment for alcohol use disorder. Naltrexone is an opioid blocker. It sits on those mu receptors. So even if you drink, the endorphins that get released can't do their job. The GABA brake stays on and you don't get that big dopamine rush.
It uncouples the drink from the reward.
It takes the chemical fun out of the equation. It turns the drug back into just a sedative without the reinforcing euphoria.
That is fascinating. Before we leave the molecular section, I have to mention the drunken worm. I saw that sidebar in Kat Sung, and I just love it.
It's so important because for a long time that wobbly membrane theory was dominant. But then researchers started studying simple organisms like C. elegans, a tiny roundworm, and fruit flies.
Organisms with very simple nervous systems.
Very simple. Yet if you expose them to ethanol vapor, they get intoxicated, they slur their movement, they stop laying eggs, they become uncoordinated, and if you do it repeatedly, they even develop tolerance.
Even a worm gets a buzz and then gets used to it.
And most importantly, geneticists were able to screen for mutations in these worms that made them resistant to alcohol's effects. They found a specific target called the BK potassium channel.
Which proves specificity. It's not just a general solvent effect.
Exactly. It proves that alcohol isn't just dissolving cell membranes like paint thinner. It has specific, evolutionarily conserved protein targets that have been with us for hundreds of millions of years. The drunken worm proves that intoxication is a specific biological event, not just general poisoning.
That leads us perfectly into section 4, the body under siege. We've done the brain, but as we said, alcohol goes everywhere. Let's talk about the heart.
The cardiovascular system is tricky because we have this J-curve data. You'll often hear that a glass of red wine a day is good for your heart.
The French paradox.
Right. And there is some epidemiological evidence for it. At low doses, 1 drink a day for women, maybe 2 for men. Alcohol causes mild vasodilation. It can increase HDL, the good cholesterol, and there's a correlation with a slight reduction in coronary artery disease risk.
Oh.
But Goodman and Gilman warns us. This is extremely complex and debatable. It could be confounding factors. And as soon as you go past that moderate intake, the curve of harm shoots up like a rocket.
So what happens at the high end of that, Jay?
Hypertension is the big one. Chronic alcohol consumption, more than 3 drinks a day, is a massive and often overlooked driver of high blood pressure. If you have a patient with resistant hypertension, you have to ask about their drinking.
And then there's the rhythm of the heart.
Holiday heart syndrome. This is a classic ER presentation. A healthy person goes out, binge drinks on a weekend or a holiday, and they end up in atrial fibrillation. The alcohol is directly irritating to the electrical conduction system of the atria.
But the scariest one has to be alcoholic cardiomyopathy?
What?
What is that physically?
It's a dilated, weak, flabby heart. We think alcohol and its metabolite, acetaldehyde, are directly toxic to the mitochondria, the powerhouses, in the heart muscle cells.
It's starving the heart of energy.
It's starving it of energy and causing oxidative stress. Over time, the heart muscle cells die and are replaced by fibrous scar tissue. The heart chambers stretch out like an overblown balloon, it becomes flabby, and it can't pump effectively. It's a form of irreversible heart failure caused entirely by a beverage.
And then, of course, there's the liver and the GI tract. We talked about the metabolic traffic jam, but what's the actual damage being done?
It's that oxidative stress again. Remember how the metabolism of alcohol consumes NAD+ and produces NADH? That shift in the redox state of the liver cell is profoundly damaging.
Oh, so?
It promotes the synthesis of fat. That's why the first stage of alcoholic liver disease is always steatosis, or fatty liver. The liver literally gets engorged with fat globules.
And you're also generating free radicals while depleting the body's main antioxidant, glutathione.
So you are generating sparks and simultaneously throwing away your fire extinguisher. The liver cells are literally torn apart by oxidation. This leads from fatty liver to alcoholic hepatitis, which is inflammation, and finally to cirrhosis, which is irreversible scarring.
And once you hit cirrhosis, the architecture of the liver is just destroyed. Blood can't flow through it properly.
Exactly. And that leads to a whole cascade of other problems like ascites and esophageal varices. It's a devastating end-stage disease.
And we can't skip the most tragic systemic effect: fetal alcohol spectrum disorders, or FASD.
This brings us right back to the molecule size and solubility. It crosses the placenta effortlessly. But here's the devastating part that I think many people don't realize. The fetal liver has almost no alcohol dehydrogenase activity.
Wait, hold on, say that again. So the mother drinks, the alcohol crosses into the baby's circulation.
The mother's liver begins to slowly clear the alcohol from her own blood. But the fetus, it has no enzyme to break it down. It is completely defenseless. It has to rely on the alcohol slowly diffusing back across the placenta into the mother's circulation to be cleared.
So the fetus is exposed for much longer.
Much longer. And it's worse than that. The fetus is constantly swallowing the amniotic fluid it's floating in. That amniotic fluid becomes a reservoir of alcohol.
So the fetus is essentially trapped in a bag of alcohol, re-ingesting it over and over.
Yes. It creates a prolonged high-concentration exposure even long after the mother's BAC has dropped. It is a horrifying image.
What does that do to the developing brain?
It causes apoptotic neurodegeneration. Basically, the developing brain cells are triggered to commit suicide. It inhibits cell migration so the brain doesn't wire itself correctly. This is why FASD is the leading known cause of preventable mental retardation and birth defects. There is no known safe dose because the fetal system is utterly defenseless.
Trapped with the alcohol. That really highlights why the zero tolerance recommendation exists during pregnancy. Okay, let's move to section 5, adaptation. This is about how the body tries to survive this chemical assault. Tolerance.
Tolerance is the moving goalpost, and it happens on 2 distinct levels. First, there's pharmacokinetic tolerance. The liver gets a little better at the job.
The Mio system.
Exactly. It induces that MeoCOP2E1 system we talked about so it can clear the drug a bit faster. This means you have to drink more just to achieve the same blood level you used to.
But that's only a small part of it.
A very small part. The more profound and dangerous change is pharmacodynamic tolerance. This happens in the brain. The brain fights back.
So we said alcohol is pressing the brakes, GABA, and cutting the gas line, blocking an MDA. The brain wants homeostasis, it wants balance. So if you hold the brakes down every single day for 10 years, the brain says, this isn't right, I'm going to fix this.
It has to. So how does it fix it? It physically changes the number of receptors on its neurons.
It remodels itself.
It remodels, it downregulates GABA receptors, it literally removes the brake pads from the system. It says, if you were going to press the brake pedal this hard all the time, I'm just going to take the brakes away.
And a gas pedal.
It upregulates NMDA receptors, it adds more gas pedals, it puts more glutamate receptors on the cell surface to try and hear the excitatory signal through the constant suppression from alcohol.
So now you have a brain that is physically rewired to be hyperexcitable, just to feel normal while on alcohol.
Exactly. The entire set point of the nervous system has shifted. The brain is now running at 100 miles per hour just to stay in the lane, and that sets the stage for the crisis. Withdrawal, the pendulum swing.
The drinker stops. The alcohol is gone.
The depressant is gone. But the adaptation, the brain's remodeling project remains.
Oh, no.
The brakes, the GABA receptors are missing. The gas pedals, the NMDA receptors are floored. Suddenly, there is nothing holding the brain back. It swings violently and uncontrollably into a state of massive overexcitation.
And this is why alcohol withdrawal can be fatal, while withdrawal from other drugs like opioids usually isn't.
Yes, this is a critical distinction. Opioid withdrawal makes you feel like you're dying. You vomit, you ache, you have diarrhea, but it very rarely kills you. Alcohol and benzodiazepine withdrawal can absolutely kill you.
Because of that glutamate storm.
Yes, that massive, unopposed glutamate release leads to excitotoxicity. It literally fries the neurons. It starts with anxiety and tremors, the shakes, usually about 6 to 8 hours after the last drink. But if it progresses, that massive excitation can cause generalized tonic-clonic seizures.
And the worst-case scenario.
Delirium tremens, or the DTs. This is a true medical emergency with a high mortality rate if it's not treated aggressively. It's not just hallucinations and confusion. The most dangerous part is the autonomic instability.
What does that mean, autonomic instability?
It means the brainstem's control over your basic bodily functions goes completely haywire. Your heart rate spikes to 150, your blood pressure fluctuates wildly, you run a high fever, you sweat profusely. You are essentially undergoing a brainstorm. You can die from a heart attack, a stroke, or just cardiovascular collapse.
It's incredible that a substance available at the grocery store can cause a withdrawal that severe. And this brings up the distinction between dependence and addiction.
It's so important. Dependence is physical. It's the tolerance and the withdrawal we just described. Your cells literally need the drug to function without going into that hyperexcitable state. Addiction, or what we now call alcohol use disorder, AUD, is the compulsion. It's the craving, the loss of control, the continued use despite negative consequences.
Tatsum describes this as a malfunction of the go and stop systems in the cortex.
Right. The go system, the habit-forming part in the dorsal striatum, becomes overactive and automatic. The stop system, the prefrontal cortex that provides executive control and says, this is a bad idea, becomes impaired by alcohol's toxic effects.
So you have a car with a brick on the accelerator and brake lines that have been cut.
A perfect analogy. And environmental cues trigger it. Walking past a specific bar, stress, seeing a bottle on TV. Those cues can light up the reward pathway and trigger intense craving even years after the physical dependence is gone.
Which brings us to Section 6, clinical translation. How do we treat the patient? Let's start with the acute situation. Someone comes into the ER, barely breathing, with acute intoxication.
Acute intoxication management is mostly supportive care. The ABCs: airway, breathing, circulation. You have to keep them breathing. You might need to intubate to protect their airway from aspiration.
What else are you looking for?
You check their electrolytes and their glucose. Chronic alcoholics are often profoundly hypoglycemic because alcohol messes with the liver's ability to generate new glucose, a process called gluconeogenesis. And you have to look for other injuries, since intoxicated people fall down.
And since alcohol is so small and water-soluble.
In extreme, life-threatening cases where the blood level is truly lethal, you can use hemodialysis. You can literally filter the alcohol right out of the blood. It's one of the few drug overdoses where dialysis is highly effective.
Okay, now, managing withdrawal. You said it's a glutamate storm with no brakes. How do we calm that storm? We can't just give them more alcohol.
We can't. So we use benzodiazepines, drugs like diazepam, which is Valium, or chlordiazepoxide, which is Librium.
Why specifically benzos?
Because of a concept called cross-dependence. Remember, alcohol works on the GABA A receptor, Well, benzodiazepines also work on the GABA A receptor. They bind to a different spot, but they have the same net effect. They enhance GABA's inhibitory action. They apply the brakes.
So you substitute the benzos for the alcohol to put the brakes back on.
Right. You replace the dirty, short-acting, hard-to-control drug, which is alcohol, with a clean, long-acting, predictable drug, which is Valium. You pharmacologically restore the brakes, which stops the seizures and calms the storm.
And then you can taper off slowly.
Exactly. Because Valium has a very long half-life, it leaves the body slowly and smoothly, allowing the brain to gently readjust its receptor numbers back to normal without crashing. It provides a soft landing.
And there's a clinical pearl here for patients with liver failure, right?
A crucial one. Many of these patients have cirrhosis. Their liver can't metabolize drugs like diazepam, which require complex phase 1 oxidation. It will build up to toxic levels.
So what do you use instead?
We use the ALOT drugs. Lorazepam, oxazepam, temazepam. These bypass that phase 1 metabolism and go straight to a simpler conjugation step. They are much, much safer for a damaged liver.
That's a key detail for the boards and the wards. Now, what about the long game? Treating the alcohol use disorder itself. We mentioned naltrexone.
Naltrexone is the opioid antagonist. As we discussed, it blocks the high by blocking the endorphin-mediated part of the dopamine reward. It's great for reducing the number of heavy drinking days. It makes drinking less satisfying.
What else is in the toolbox?
There's a camprosate. This one is really interesting. Its exact mechanism is complex, but it seems to act as a weak NMDA antagonist and a GABA modulator.
So it sort of mimics the effects of alcohol, but very weakly?
In a way, it helps to stabilize that hyperexcitable brain we talked about during protracted withdrawal. It reduces the relief craving, that awful feeling of dysphoria and anxiety that drives people back to drinking. It helps people stay quit.
And the old school one, disulfiram.
Disulfiram, or Antabuse. This one works directly on the metabolism. It is an irreversible inhibitor of aldehyde dehydrogenase. Remember that second step. The one that clears the toxic acetaldehyde.
So it artificially mimics the Asian flush genetic mutation.
Precisely. It creates that genetic blockage in anyone who takes it. If you are on disulfiram and you drink even a small amount of alcohol, the toxic acetaldehyde piles up instantly.
And what happens?
You get violently ill, flushing, a pounding heart, violent nausea and vomiting, a feeling of impending doom. It is profound negative reinforcement.
It's a chemical deterrent.
It is. It doesn't stop the craving, but it absolutely stops the drinking because the consequence is immediate and severe punishment. It requires a highly motivated patient, obviously, because they have to consciously choose to take that pill every morning.
Before we wrap up, we have to briefly mention the other alcohols, because sometimes people drink things they really shouldn't. Methanol and ethylene glycol.
Wood alcohol and antifreeze. These are deadly. But interestingly, they aren't that toxic by themselves. Methanol gets you drunk, just like ethanol. Ethylene glycol has similar effects. It's their metabolites that are the killers.
Because the liver tries to process them using the same ADH enzyme.
Right. ABH sees methanol and turns it into formaldehyde and then formic acid. Formic acid has a specific toxicity for the optic nerve and retina. It causes blindness. The phrase blind drunk originally comes from wood alcohol poisoning.
And antifreeze.
ADH turns ethylene glycol into glycolic acid and then oxalic acid. Oxalic acid binds with calcium in the blood and forms sharp calcium oxalate crystals in the kidney tubules. It literally shreds the kidneys from the inside out, causing acute renal failure.
And the treatment is, bizarrely, more alcohol. I've heard this story.
Historically, yes. The treatment was an IV drip of ethanol. It's based on a principle called competitive inhibition.
Okay.
The enzyme, ADH, actually prefers ethanol. It has a much higher affinity for ethanol than it does for methanol or ethylene glycol.
So if you flood the system with whiskey,
the ADH enzyme gets completely occupied processing the whiskey and totally ignores the methanol. The methanol then just floats around harmlessly until it's slowly excreted by the kidneys, unmetabolized. You literally keep the patient drunk to save their life.
that is absolutely wild.
It is. Nowadays, we have a much better drug called fompizole, which is a direct inhibitor of the enzyme and works without the drunkenness. But in a pinch, ethanol works. It's a perfect life-saving example of enzyme kinetics in action.
All right, we have covered a massive amount of ground. We've gone from the tiny 2-carbon molecule to the traffic jam in the liver, the rewiring of the brain's entire reward system, the devastating body-wide damage, and the clinical strategies to fight back. What does this all mean when you put it together?
For me, the synthesis is this. Ethanol is a crude, dirty drug. It relies on sheer brute force grams, not milligrams, to hijack the brain's most delicate and ancient systems. It's a metabolic bully, hogging all the NAD plus airings, and a direct cellular toxin.
And the adaptation is the really tragic part.
It is. The most profound takeaway is that the body is just trying to survive. The tolerance, the upregulation, the withdrawal, that is the body desperately trying to maintain homeostasis in the face of a constant chemical flood. The pathology is a result of a survival mechanism.
It's a battle between our biology and the chemistry we pour into it.
And chemistry usually wins, unless we intervene with smarter chemistry like benzodiazepines or naltrexones, and of course, crucial psychosocial support.
I want to leave the listener with a final thought, something that really struck me while reading Goodwin and Gilman. We have these enzymes, ADH and ALDH, for a reason. Evolutionarily, they were probably there to help our primate ancestors detoxify the tiny amounts of alcohol found in fermenting, rotting fruit on the forest floor.
Right, a rotting plum on the savannah. We needed to be able to eat it for the calories without getting sick from the trace ethanol.
Exactly. Our biology evolved to handle a rotting plum, but we have engineered an entire global society around flooding that delicate, ancient detoxification system with industrial quantities of the substrate. We built a culture around a molecule that our biology can only handle in drops. The pathology we see, the addiction, the cirrhosis, the birth defects, is essentially a massive mismatch between our ancient biology and our modern culture.
That is a profound way to look at it. We are overwhelming our own evolution.
And on that perhaps cheery note, we encourage you to open the books. Read Katzun chapter 23 and 32. Look at the diagrams of the VTA trace, that inhibitor on an inhibitor path for yourself. Read Goodman and Gilman chapter 23. Look at those J-curve graphs for cardiovascular risk. The deep dive gives you the map, but the real treasure is in the text.
Absolutely. Keep learning.
Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive. We'll see you next time.